Hello and welcome to Multicultural Children's Literature. This is my favorite quote ever in the world. Some things one can see for oneself, other things depend on the telling of the tale, and it fits in so wonderfully with our class because we're going to be looking at all sorts of children's books and all sorts of reasons why diverse multicultural children's books are so important. Like, take this book, for example, Click, Clack, Moo, Cows That Type. It's actually a book about anarchy. It's about the whole takeover of the cows and the duck and other animals in the barn that are cold. The cows want electric blankets and the farmer doesn't want to give them to them. So there's some interesting messages in seemingly just charming little books. And then ones that are a little more obvious. So we're going to talk a lot about children's books in here, and we're going to talk about a lot of things that are connected to children's books and why I think children's books can help save the world. Because something more amazing than a solar eclipse, that's my daughter Zoe, is this. Information about how, if you read the Harry Potter series, that it's been proven, it's been determined in studies that you will reduce your prejudices towards minority groups. So that's the way they put it in this article that was published in England. We would probably do it a little bit differently. We would look at reducing prejudices towards, people of color or something. So there would be a little bit different wording. That's 2014. We've gotten a little more respectful. But so the idea that you're reading these books, and there's nothing incredibly diverse with these books, right? Harry Potter stuff, but that it actually helps you kind of realize that there's other people in the world, and you're not just the only one around, and the ideal, standard or something. So where were these books in 2017 when these white nationalists with their tiki torches were trying to unite the right? I'm not thinking they read very many Harry Potter books. And how about in 2020, the takeover of Michigan's capital, right, by these marvelous people? They probably have to read a really huge stack of Harry Potter books to kind of get right with themselves. And of course, the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Not thinking they read Harry Potter. They'd mean more than that, right? So again, you might ask, what does this have to do with multicultural children's literature? I think it has to do a lot with it, and that's what we're going to explore this semester. For example, this book is long gone. Of course, I blocked out the offensive word here, but it's not around. So that's great. So we've gotten a little better about understanding what we need to do in order to really reflect our society. But this book, The Story of Little Black Sambo, it's been around forever and is still being published, and that means it's still in the hands of children. Excuse me, I'm going to drink a sip of tea here. Nice and hot. Irish breakfast, by the way. Excuse me. So here's what that means, is that when we look at books that are still in circulation, we look at books that have crappy messages, we realize that these, excuse my language, these crappy messages are being received by children, and children consider these messages to be the real deal. So what happens is that stereotypes about some of our population becomes reality, which is an amazing thing. Excuse me, when you think that books have this power, and guess what they do? What's the connection? There's a connection. Books objectifying girls. Oh, they're all over the place, right? Just a dime a dozen. And you look at what are on most of the covers of these would be the dominant white culture sort of idea of beauty and representation. The makeup I love. Today I'll be a princess. What's the connection? Here's one. So Scholastic Books, fabulous little company that publishes inexpensive books for children, and they have book fairs in schools, and it's just a really powerful way for kids to get their own books. But look at this one: Red Riding Hood gets lost. Who's the wolf now, right? It's not a real wolf. It's that guy on the right. What's the connection? This book, I was raised on this book, The Five Chinese Brothers. It's about, it's a really interesting story, but it's once upon a time there were 5 Chinese brothers and they all looked exactly alike. And guess what? It's still on the book racks. It's still published. This is at World Market. It's still in classrooms. It's still in libraries. It's still being read. What's the connection? I is for Indian. Beat my chest. Woo, 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 woo. Let's play Indian. Let's dress as Indians. Our nation was born in genocide when it embraced the doctrine that the original American, the American Indian, as we call that, was an inferior race. What's the connection? Okay, enough of that, right? We should be asking what's the question. So the question is, what we look at a lot in here, how can we help counter sexist and racist messages? We change the message. Another one of my quotes I really like, I'm going to read it to you. Quality multicultural literature provides an opportunity for all children to see themselves in books, fosters a positive self-esteem, and cultivates respect and empathy and acceptance of people. Big stuff, right? You need to see yourself. You need to be represented in your society. You need to see yourself in positive ways, in really empowering, beautiful ways, right? Got to give it to you again. Let you read it this time while I sip some tea. Thank you. Okay, so multicultural children's literature is defined in all sorts of ways. Gonna go over it really quickly. Don't worry about soaking it all in. Things change all the time, right? So when I was growing up, and kind of still a standard is that multicultural literature typically focuses on people of color from diverse cultural, linguistic, and religious groups. That was kind of thing. It was like outside of the U.S. in a way, just kind of world things, sort of exotic sort of stuff, right? But in this class, we're defining multicultural children's literature as literature about race, ethnicity, and identity, minority groups or marginalized groups that are culturally and socially different from the white-centered majority of the U.S., whose large and middle-class values and customs are the most represented in American literature, right? So multicultural children's literature is outside of that dominant culture, right? We're going to look at everybody else in our society, so many things to look at, and kind of course, fold in a little bit of white culture, but kind of stay away from it pretty much, because this is a multicultural children's literature class. So we're looking at literature, we're looking at children's books, we're looking at ways that we really need to consider the diversity of our society and how we can help foster and embrace our communities, right? So, but we're looking at people outside of that dominant culture. And I'm saying the bottom line here is that we're looking at books that don't include dead white presidents. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying giving that as kind of an emblem of our dominant culture. So technically, our dominant culture, as far as I see it in the United States, is male, white, heterosexual, Christian, temporarily able-bodied, youthful, and has access to wealth and resources. So just you know who what I'm talking about. I'm not saying this is the enemy here necessarily, but I'm saying this is the standard, and it has been the standard for our media, and it still is the standard for our media. I mean, this looking at the nominations for the Oscars just came out a couple days ago. I haven't really dug into it very much, but looked at the nominations for the uh, best female actors, and it's 4 white women and a Native American, an American Indian, which is a score. But so we're still looking at this as continuing to reflect and represent an overproportionate amount of our society, right? So what we're going to be doing is looking at what I consider a basic level multicultural children's literature, which is literature about people who are outside of that dominant culture. And so maybe you're saying, what's the big deal about multicultural children's literature? Like, why you think it's so important? I think it's really important because what literature has done for eons in media, really for eons, is it helps you become informed about the world around you, whether it's just in your neighborhood or it's in across the states or across the world, right? It does that, and the thing is that it does it really effectively. Media is really effective, and children's books still are. We got lots of screens, right? But children's books are still really pack a punch. So it's strong messages is what I'm trying to say. And so the deal is that because strong messages are here, and if we just represent the dominant ideals in our society, then I think it becomes a dangerous sort of situation, and we see that demonstrated throughout our communities, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later. So, as I've said, the dominant culture, right? I like this quote is overwhelmingly white, keeps females in traditional roles, is oriented around the need of the wealthy, focuses on individual achievement instead of the well-being of the community, glorifies systems that keep people of color, poor people, women, and other oppressed groups in their place. So that's kind of a more of a sussed out definition of the dominant culture, right? So that has, and we'll look at that in all sorts of ways. You just thought this was going to be about children's books, didn't you? And we'll look at that and through the eyes of children's literature, and you'll see some of the connections I'm talking about. I love this quote. So it says, when those who have the power to name and to socially construct reality choose not to see you or hear you, whether you are dark-skinned, old, disabled, female, or speak with a different accent or dialect than theirs. When someone with the authority of a teacher, say, big authority there, describes the world and you're not in it, there is a moment of psychic disequilibrium, as if you looked into a mirror and saw nothing. That's from Adrienne Rich from like a million years ago, a lesbian poet from the United States. So I'm thinking that a lot of people in my classes feel that they were not always reflected in their society. If you just think for a minute, you can maybe consider yourself one of those people. I personally was one of those people as queer growing up, when it was pretty like, woo, I was not reflected in my society, right? And I'm sure that there's all sorts of reasons why a number of you have felt that way as well. And we'll dig into that a little bit too. So, yeah, we're just talking about children's books. Yeah, we still are. Sipping tea, excuse me. But I'm not here to like deconstruct all children's books. I mean, there's great reasons for books like The Very Hungry Caterpillar. It's a fabulous book, right? But we're going to be talking about multicultural children's books, and hopefully do a little bit more than just kind of look at the surface. We're kind of deconstruct and really get into things a bit deeper, hopefully, in this class through children's books. So, because the scary thing is that children really lock in fast to what is valued. what is the standard in our society. There's a million studies, and this is just one of them, but just the idea that by the age of 5, and I'm telling you, Sonny, it's like way sooner than that, they already got an idea about race and gender, and like, who's taught it, who is better. And I mean, it just goes on. And again, we'll get into that a little bit more. So if we get them while they're young, get them while they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, children's picture books. It's a really great way to help change this world. I really, really believe that. I love this poet, and she's a naturalist who did some really great books. Tinker on Pilgrim Creek, Annie Dillard. And she talked about this when she was kind of considering Alice in Wonderland. And if you grew up in the U.S., you know that Alice, one pill makes you larger. So she's kind of like, late for a very important date with a white rabbit. And she's all over the place. And she's like eating something getting bigger and drinking something getting smaller and all that kind of stuff. So Dillard says that she's just like kind of, horrifically fascinated with this tale and the idea that Alice has the ability to magically change sizes, especially when she shrinks just by eating a cookie, right? So Dillard talks about the process of just like shrinking, of paring down, of slipping through the mirror's crack and being rendered almost invisible, and just like how awful that is, right? How awful that is. And so a lot of what we're talking about in here in this class is how to remedy being rendered almost invisible. Like, how do we do that? What do we do? And what we're doing in here is we're questioning the designated default, and we're doing that through the investigation of children's books and the stereotypes and what's come before and what's coming now and what we hope is coming after. And that's what the whole focus is in here. So my job I have a job as your teacher, but first I want to talk to you about this book. So I love this watercolor. It's just so great. So I just want to give you an example of how easy it is to just get a book and think it's okay and realize maybe some of the influence of that book. And then you stack a number of books that kind of have just crappy messages, I'm going to say, and like we're in trouble. So I have a preschool, and I've been a preschool teacher for a long time, besides doing some college stuff and all sorts of other teaching. And I have a preschool on Bainbridge Island right now. It's kind of on hold because I love my little granddaughter, so I'm doing that right now. But so what I do, I go to the public library because, wow, use of free books is really fabulous. And I would go and get like a pile of books every week, and sometimes they'd be a little lazy about it. This is like, this was at least, this one probably was I got this probably about 6 years ago, so it's been a while. But so I looked at this book and thought, oh, cool. Okay, so here's a teacher. It's a female teacher, even though it's a white teacher. It's a female teacher because guess what? 99.9% of elementary school teachers are females, but in the books, a lot of times they're always males, even if it's a mouse. Always male. So I'm thinking, okay, great, score 1. And I'm thinking, great story. It's this book. She has this magic book, and she takes her kids. She opens it, and they go into all these lands. So they opened it and went into this land of the dinosaurs, right? So cool. I like that part. And I'm flipping in. Okay, there's some diversity in the children. They're not all white, and we got some different identities here. So that's really cool too. And then I grab it and don't do anything else and start reading it to my preschoolers, and then I realize something. So I realized, first of all, the pterodactyl swoops up Ms. Smith. I mean, she's got a leather jacket on, and look at her hair. Come on. Swoops her up into its nest, and then Ms. Smith needs to be rescued. I'm thinking, come on, Ms. Smith, do some modeling here. Get out of there by yourself. But no, she's going to be rescued. And so she looks down at her whole classroom of children below her, just so willing to rescue her, right? So she looks, and who does she pick? She picks a white boy to rescue her. And I'm not saying that white boy shouldn't rescue. I'm not saying that. But when we're trying to counter some of these dominant culture messages, like, let's not do that, right? So then I thought, wow, just these kinds of books. I mean, there's tons of them out there. So I'm not saying every once in a while that this would hurt to do this, but if you're just kind of always leaning towards these dominant culture messages, dang. But anyway, my my task as your teacher is to kind of, in this class specifically, help you kind of think about not letting children, not letting people, not letting our citizens slip through the merest crack and become invisible. That's really my job in here, I think. It's this, that we really have to look at the telling of the tale. And we have big and important stories in this class and in this world, right? And the deal is that literature is a really important aspect of our world. It still is, even with those screens. And we have to be sure that we're presenting good stuff. So you can tell I love books, right? And so in this class, we're going to talk a lot about books. So Blue Knows Which. That was a book I loved when I was growing up, and it took me a million years to realize why did I love it? Because it had a female protagonist. It wasn't happening in my realm. So cool. She was this witch, and she had to powder her nose because it was blue, but she didn't do it at Halloween. She wore her, she came out. She came out at Halloween, and there was donuts and all sorts of stuff. Cool book. It just resonated with me, and it resonated with me for all sorts of reasons. But one, because I could see myself in the character, literally, right? So we're going to check all that stuff out. There's so many books out there that we're going to look at. This is another book that really resonated with me, really kind of grabbed me, right? Grabbed me. It was my side of the mountain. And because I had a kind of crappy home environment, and this kid was about 12 or something, and his family let him go live in the country. It was his grandfather's acreage for the summer, and oh my gosh, he got to get away, and it was so cool. He lived in this hollow tree, and he found and trained this falcon. I mean, cool stuff, right? Oh my gosh, that's all I wanted to do. Is I wanted to go to that side of the mountain and get out of my reality. How much I would connect with it if this would have been a female, right? I mean, we all modify, right? So when you think about a book or a story or something that you really loved when you were younger, why did you love it? What was the connection, right? So that's what we're going to kind of explore in here. And I'm not saying there's all the books out there are awful. There's great books out there. But in this class, what we need to do is think about how we debunk, how we move away from the idea that there's a standard, there's a model. I don't know why I did so many of these. And that we need to get away from the dominant culture narrative of this is what's right, what's beautiful, what's appropriate. And we do it. With so many great books. So many. Oh my gosh, so many. Tribe-specific American Indian, the Salish, Duwamishes, and Suquamish, my neck of the woods, actually. And we're talking about identities too, right? Disability and LGBTQ, and we're talking about a lot of stuff in here. That's all I'm going to say, because of course I went too long. As usual, I get so enthusiastic, right? Fabulous book. This is going to be one of our read alouds. Oh my gosh, I love this book so much. And I love this book so much. So in this class, we're reading a lot and we're talking about a lot of stuff, but you took this class because it's a writing intensive class, right? And you got to do 5,000 words in here. And I'm going to help you do it. But we're going to be talking about a lot of different stuff. A lot of writing and a lot of topics that sometimes, might offend people. But we're going to do that in here. Because here's a big, huge message. When children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, or when the images they see are distorted, negative, or laughable, they learn a powerful lesson about how they are devalued in the society of which they are a part. It's in the news all the time right now, right? How portions of our society are devalued. Oh my God, I could go on. I could list a million things as to how that's happening in the United States and happening around the world, right? It's all connected. It's all important. And children's books are part of it. And representation is part of it. So that's what I want to talk about. That's what I'm going to talk about. I keep coming back to that, but I'm big on it, right? So it's not just about Fun with Dick and Jane, a really old book from a million years ago. We got to stir it up, right? Fun with Dick and Jane. How about Fun with Darius and Jada? Oh, let's just skip Dick. And how about Fun with Jada, right? All these things we'll be speculating. And you're looking at this fabulous TED Talk from Chimamanda Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and she says this single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they're untrue, but they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. And that's what we're talking about in here. That's it in a nutshell, really. So join us, join me, join us. Join Jupiter. See her? She's way down there. Can you see? Very end of the trail.